The heat hung over Dragon Junction like a suffocating blanket, the kind of dry, unyielding furnace that turned dirt to powder and made men mean. The sun hadn't reached its peak, yet already the streets shimmered under waves of heat rising from the cracked earth. Wagons creaked, sweat-stained shirts, and a gathering crowd festered around the crude platform erected in front of Ketterman's trading post. Dust clung to everything, including the young woman standing on the platform. Clara May Whitlock wore a dress that might once have been a soft blue, but had long since surrendered to the dust. She stood with her shoulders back, chin raised, though the red mark on her cheek told of a recent slap. Beside her, a scruffy goat bleated impatiently, tugging at a frayed rope tied to a post. The absurdity of it struck some of the onlookers, a girl and a goat, sold as one lot like broken tools. No one spoke against it. The auctioneer, a lanky, yellow-toothed man named Emmett Grogg, cleared his throat. He wore a sun-warped hat and a jacket too fine for his station, a gift, some said, from the butcher's sons. His voice cracked as he raised it above the murmuring crowd. Next up, one female, able-bodied, fit for housework or field, alongside this here goat, both together, package deal, Emmett announced, smirking as a ripple of laughter swept through the gathered men. Bidding starts at $3. A thin old man spat in the dust, shaking his head. No one moved. No one wanted the attention. No one wanted to cross Royce Mallerie. Royce sat astride a bay mare near the front of the crowd, his red hair peeking from beneath a gambler's hat. A thin scar slashed down his cheek, and his grin spread easy cruel. He was second only to Clay Butcher himself, and in Dragon Junction, that made him untouchable. His gang lounged nearby, leaning against posts, spitting tobacco, watching. "I'll give 4," Royce called, his voice like a knife's edge. Emmett's smile flickered. $4 bid. The girl flinched but kept her eyes forward, focused on the horizon beyond the saloon, beyond the town's borders, where the land rolled away into endless desert. There'd be no one to help her here. It was then a new sound cut through the sweltering hush, the slow clop of a horse's hooves on dry-packed earth. Heads turned as a man rode in from the south trail, a tall figure in a faded duster the color of old bone. His hat's brim hung low, shadowing his face. The horse beneath him was a huge black stallion, its coat catching glimmers of sun, like polished coal. The stranger dismounted without hurry. Dust rose around his boots as he stepped forward, leaving the stallion standing still as a post. He wore a revolver low on his hip, tied at the thigh, and a long, battered rifle slung across his back. His presence rolled over the crowd like a chill wind. Nobody spoke. Even Royce straightened in his saddle, narrowing his eyes. The stranger stopped before the platform, studying Clara for a moment, then looked at the goat, as if weighing which of the two had endured worse. Emmett coughed. "You here to bid, mister?" The stranger reached into his coat, pulled out a worn leather pouch, and let a gold coin fall into his palm. It caught the sun like a flare, the yellow glint freezing every man in place. Without a word, he stepped forward and dropped it at Emmett's feet. The coin struck wood and spun, settling with a soft clink. "My home needs you more," the stranger said, his voice low, steady as earth. Clara's breath caught. She turned her head, truly looking at him for the first time. The face beneath the shadowed brim was lined, weathered, with pale eyes like river stones. No cruelty in them, no pity either, just something hard, old, and unbroken. Royce laughed, though the sound was tight. "Now hold on there, mister. That girl's mine. Bought and bid fair. No man owns her," the stranger replied, not turning. "Fella, you must be new around here," Royce said, the grin sharp. "Ain't wise to cross the butcher's sons." The air thickened. Even the goat went still. Emmett shuffled, his gaze darting between Royce and the stranger. His lips worked. Now, no call for ruffled feathers. Coin's good. Guess the lot sold." Royce's hand dropped to his sidearm. In a blink, the stranger's revolver cleared its holster. The hammer thumbed back, and the barrel pointed squarely at Royce's heart. No flourish, no threat spoken, just that cold, flat stare. "I'll be taking the girl," the stranger said. A ripple ran through the crowd. Royce's hand froze an inch from his pistol, the memory of death keen in his mind. For a long, brittle moment, the world seemed to shrink to those two men and the space between them. Finally, Royce forced a grin. "Suit yourself. Ain't worth dying for trash." He wheeled his horse, spitting into the dust. "You'll regret this, stranger," he called over his shoulder as he rode off, his men trailing after, muttering. The stranger holstered his weapon, motioned to Clara. She stepped down from the platform on shaking legs, clinging to dignity like a threadbare shawl. The goat bleated and followed. The townsfolk watched them leave in silence. The stranger led the stallion with one hand, Clara and the goat behind him. No one dared speak until they disappeared down the south trail. "Who in hell was that?" someone murmured. The auctioneer only stared at the dust, where a gold coin gleamed like a shard of sun, and said nothing. The trail south of Dragon Junction stretched in an unbroken line of brittle dust and sun-bleached stone. Clara followed the stranger in silence, the goat plodding along at her side, its rope dragging through the dust. Her feet ached, her throat burned, but she dared not complain. The man walked with the steady pace of someone who'd covered 1,000 such trails, neither fast nor slow, the big black stallion trailing obediently behind him like a shadow. He hadn't spoken since leaving town. Clara stole glances at him when she could. His duster was worn but clean, his hat's brim frayed by years of wind. The revolver on his hip bore the scuffs of long use, and the rifle across his back carried a quiet authority. There was something about the way he moved, a kind of practiced calm, as though every step was measured, every movement chosen. The land around them gave way to low hills, dry washes, and scattered mesquite. A hawk circled high overhead, its cries sharp in the stillness. Clara felt the weight of her escape settle on her like a second skin. She didn't know if she'd been rescued or claimed by another kind of trouble. By late afternoon, they crested a ridge, and there below, tucked into a shallow hollow, stood a ranch house. It wasn't much to look at, a low-slung building of sun-faded timber, a barn leaning at one side, fencing half-mended. A narrow creek shimmered nearby, its banks lined with willow scrub. A small garden struggled against the heat, and 2 cows grazed by a patch of rough grass. The stranger led them down without a word. Clara's heart kicked against her ribs. She half expected a line of men to come spilling from the house, weapons ready, but the place lay quiet. At the hitching post, the stranger tethered the stallion and turned to face her. "Name's Elijah Cade," he said at last, voice like gravel underboot. Clara swallowed. "Clara May Whitlock." He nodded, as if that explained everything. "Ain't much here," he went on, gesturing to the house. "But it's mine. You'll be safe. Nobody'll lay a hand on you, so long as you stay inside my fence." She didn't quite know what to say to that. Her fingers twisted the goat's rope. "Why'd you back there?" Elijah considered this, leaning against the post. "Some things a man don't abide. Slavery, cowardice, men like Royce Mallerie. Ain't the first I've crossed." Clara's throat tightened. "You risked your life for someone you don't know." His pale eyes met hers. "Owed a kindness once. Man pulled me from a noose when I was 19. Taught me you don't leave folks behind to rot. Never forgot it." The sun slid lower, bleeding the sky in shades of fire. A pair of ravens settled in the cottonwood by the barn. The ranch felt timeless, caught somewhere between struggle and stubborn survival. Elijah pushed away from the post. "You can sleep in the house. Food's plain, but there's enough. Water from the pump out back. That goat can stay in the shed." Clara hesitated, then followed him toward the house. The door creaked on its hinges. Inside, the air was cooler shaded. A simple room held a rough-hewn table, a battered stove, and shelves lined with jars of preserved fruit. A rifle rested against the far wall. A second door led to a small bedroom with a narrow bed and a quilt worn to softness. Elijah filled a tin cup from a jug and handed it to her. The water was cool, clean. Clara drank deeply, savoring the ache in her throat as it eased. "I ain't a man for many words," Elijah said, watching her over the rim of his own cup. "But you'll have a fair place here. Works hard. Land don't give nothing easy. You stay. You'll pull your weight." She nodded. "I can cook. So some. Used to help my pa with the cattle till he passed. That'll do. A silence settled between them, but it wasn't a bad one. Outside, the goat bleated in protest as a coyote's cry echoed distant on the wind. Clara felt a knot in her chest begin to loosen, if only a little. Elijah turned toward the stove. I'll fix some beans. You look near starved. She hadn't realized how hungry she was until the smell of cooking filled the room, simple and earthy. She watched him move around the kitchen, efficient, like a man used to fending for himself. It struck her how different he was from men like Royce. No boasting, no threats, just quiet, stubborn living. Later, after they'd eaten, Elijah stepped outside with his rifle slung over his shoulder. Coyotes'll come sniffing, he said. Best see to the fence. Clara lingered at the doorway, watching the sky fade to purple, the stars pricking into view. For the first time in years, she wasn't afraid of the night. Before vanishing into the darkness, Elijah looked back. You're not a prisoner here, Clara. Stay or go. Your say. Then he was gone into the trees, the hush of evening closing behind him. And Clara, standing in the doorway of a stranger's home, realized she didn't want to leave. Not yet. Not while men like Royce Mallerie still drew breath. Word spread in the way it always did in places like Dragon Junction, quietly at first, carried by a ranch hand's careless remark or a whiskey-soaked whisper in the saloon, until it reached the ears of men who knew how to make blood flow. Royce Mallerie sat in the back room of the hollow spur, a bottle of rye at his elbow and a knife turning slow between his fingers, when the news came. Some drifter took her, said Jeb Mallerie, Royce's eldest. A hard, heavy-set man with a face like a boiled ham, eyes too small for his thick brow. Walked right into the square like he owned it. Paid for her with gold coin. Didn't blink none. Royce's face darkened, his lips, already thin, pressed to a bloodless line. And you let it happen. Weren't my say, Jeb muttered, shifting under his father's stare. Sheriff didn't move neither. Town folks scattered soon as the man looked their way. Royce's hand stopped turning the knife. The room felt close, thick with tobacco smoke and sweat. Nobody crosses me, he said softly, though the words bit like a whip. Not in my town, not in my sight, and not for some ragged bit of trail trash. The other Mallerie sons sat gathered around the table. Cain, wiry and sharp-eyed, his mouth always curved in a cruel smirk. Levi, heavy and slow, good for breaking heads, but little else. And Waylon, the youngest, eager to prove himself dangerous. Together they made up the butcher's sons, a name earned not from their trade but from what they left behind. Heard tell, Cain drawled, leaning forward. The man was Elijah Cade. A flicker passed through Royce's gaze. The name wasn't one easily forgotten. Cade's dead. Maybe, Cain shrugged. Or maybe he's been hiding in these hills. Either way, he bought the girl and walked her right out of town, goat and all. The room fell into a tight silence. Royce reached for the bottle, drank deep. If it was Cade, if the old ghost had crawled out of whatever hole he'd been buried in, there was no letting this stand. Mount up, Royce said, rising from his chair, the knife clattering to the table. We ride tonight. Jeb grunted, pushing away from the table. The brothers moved as one, the easy coordination of men who'd spent their lives hurting others. Guns were checked, shells counted, knives slid into boots. Outside, the last of the evening sun painted the sky in sullen streaks of orange. 12 men in all rode out from Dragon Junction, the Mallerie clan at their head. The others were cutthroats and hired rifles, men who owed Royce in coin or fear. Their horses kicked up dust as they left the edge of town, heading south, following the trail through barren gullies and dry washes. Royce rode with a cold purpose, his mind chewing over the insult. It wasn't about the girl. It never had been. It was about standing, about fear. A man like him ruled through the knowledge that any slight would be met with swift and merciless reprisal. If he let Cade walk away with that girl, even once, it opened a crack in the order of things. And cracks led to collapse. Cain, Royce called without looking. You say one word more about Cade being alive, I'll slit your tongue out myself. Cain chuckled, unconcerned. Wasn't mayonnaise nothing. Pa man just got a reputation is all. I'll see him get shot before dawn, Royce promised. The trail wound through low hills, moonlight glinting off scattered rock. Somewhere a coyote sang a lonely, rising note into the night. The posse moved fast, horses slick with sweat, rifles across saddles. Royce knew the land well enough. Cade's place, if it was him, would be tucked down by the old Willow Creek. They reached the ridge by midnight. Royce held up a hand, and the riders pulled to a halt. Below them lay the ranch, a squat house, a barn, the faint shimmer of water. A lamp glowed in a single window. Royce grinned, teeth white in the dark. Kane, take Waylon and Jasper. Circle round the east fence. I want no one coming out that back door. Jeb, Levi with me. The rest, keep your iron ready. Men nodded, splitting off. Kane and his pair vanished into the shadows. Royce loosened the colt at his side. He wanted Cade alive long enough to bleed. Kill the girl if you see her, Royce said, voice low and mean. She ain't worth the rope it'd take to hang her. Jeb spat into the dirt. Ain't never seen a man buy himself so much trouble for a goat and a ragdoll. Royce didn't answer. He nudged his horse forward, the others falling in behind. As they crept down the slope, Royce's grin widened. By morning, the ranch would burn, and Dragon Junction would remember who held the reins. But in the silent dark beyond the fence line, eyes watched their approach, and the man those eyes belonged to was neither dead nor inclined to forgive. The dawn came sullen and slow, bleeding pale light over the ridges of Creed's Canyon. Mist clung to the stones like breath from a dying man's mouth, and the world felt hushed, waiting for something to snap. Elijah Cade stood at the mouth of a narrow pass, the girl huddled behind him, and the goat tethered to a rock. He held his rifle loose in his hands, though his face was tight, eyes fixed on the rim above. He knew Royce Mallerie well enough to know he wouldn't let this lie. Men like Royce lived on fear, and fear dried up quick when folks started whispering about someone standing tall. Royce wouldn't risk the cracks. Not now. Not for some girl and an old drifter. He'd come, with guns, with blood on his mind, and Elijah Cade had been waiting for it. He'd spent the night moving, left the ranch when the shadows grew long and the stars thickened overhead, slipping down old miners' tracks and forgotten arroyos. Took the girl with him, silent and wide-eyed, said nothing except what needed saying. Creed's Canyon, he told her. You keep to the rocks. You don't run. If you hear shooting, you don't scream. She hadn't asked why. Folks who'd lived through the things she had knew when not to. Now, standing in the brittle light, Cade could feel it. The electric prickle in the air, the heaviness that settles just before steel and bone start splitting apart. He took a breath, steady and deep, and lifted his voice. Mallerie. His voice cracked the canyon like a whip, bounced off a stone. You ride with your kin, or are you too scared to face one man alone? A reply came quick. I'll face you with your guts hanging, Cade. And there he was, Royce Mallerie himself, coming up over the saddle of a black gelding, his hat low, his face a slab of old gristle. Behind him rode his sons and a half-dozen of Dragon's meanest. Dust rose behind them, and sunlight caught the glint of rifle barrels. You always did have a taste for theatrics, Cade called. Royce's grin was a wolf's thing. You always did have a taste for dying slow. Cade didn't smile. He stepped back into the narrowest part of the canyon, where the walls pressed tight, where no more than two men could ride abreast. He'd chosen this place for a reason. Royce had numbers. Cade had stones, cover, and a long memory. The girl clung to the rock behind him, hands scraped raw from the climb. She hadn't spoken since the ranch, but now her voice came thin. They'll kill you. Cade glanced back. Maybe, but not quiet. The first shot came from the rim. Kane Mallerie, crouched behind a boulder, tried for Cade's head. The bullet smacked dust from the canyon wall inches from his ear. Cade dropped to one knee, leveled his rifle, and fired. Kane jerked backward, a blossom of dark red blooming in his chest. His body tumbled down the slope like a sack of loose meat. The canyon roared to life. Gunfire cracked from every angle, a deafening, teeth-rattling storm of lead. Cade moved like a man half his age, sliding between cover, his Winchester barking sharp answers. A rider came charging in. Levi Mallerie, his shotgun raised. Cade shot his horse from under him. The animal screamed, toppled, and pinned Levi's leg beneath it. Cade ended him a breath later. Royce's voice boomed through the dust. Pin him down. Drive him back. His men surged forward, but the canyon betrayed them. Cade's bullets sparked off rocks, tore through shoulders, dropped a man clean from his saddle. Each shot counted. No wasted lead. No wild chances. He fought like a man cashing in the last of his debts. Waylon Mallerie made it close. A knife in hand. His face split with a grin. He leapt from the saddle. Cade met him with the butt of his rifle, cracked his jaw sideways, then spun and drove a bullet through his gut as he staggered. The girl watched it all with wide, unblinking eyes. One of Royce's men tried climbing the side wall, looking to flank. Cade spotted him, waited for the man to clear the ledge, then took the shot. The body fell hard, tumbling to rest not far from Kane's corpse. Soon there were only 3 left. Royce, Jeb, and a rifleman Cade didn't know. The canyon fell into a lull. Smoke hung in the air, thick and bitter. Blood stained the sand. Cade, crouched behind a slab of shale, reloaded methodically, sweat streaking his dirt-caked face. "You ain't leaving here alive, Cade." Royce's voice came sharp, edged with fury and something thinner, like the first thread of fear. "Neither are you," Cade called back. A shot cracked, struck the stone near Cade's head. He flinched, rolled to better cover. The goat bleated once, panicked. The girl huddled lower. Cade's mind worked fast. He had maybe 5 rounds left. The sun was climbing, and if Royce made a break for higher ground, it was over. He waited, listened. The sound came, hoofbeats, charging fast. Cade lunged from cover, rifle to shoulder, just as Jeb Mallerie burst into view. The big man's face was a red, snarling mask, pistol raised. Cade fired. The shot punched through Jeb's throat, turned his last word into a wet gurgle. The body slid from the saddle, landed hard. 2 left. Cade moved quick, sprinting toward a rock outcrop as another shot whined past him. He threw himself down, heart pounding, chest tight. Royce called out, "You should have stayed dead, Elijah. You think this little show makes you some kind of hero." "I ain't here for hero's work," Cade shouted back, voice raw. "I'm here to settle a debt." He didn't wait for a reply. From his position, he caught sight of the rifleman, a scrawny, rat-faced man crouched behind a boulder. Cade took a breath, aimed and fired. The man jerked back, his weapon clattering from numb fingers. One more body in the dust. Only Royce now. The canyon stilled. No more shots. No more hoofbeats. Then Royce's voice. "Closer now. You don't got it in you, Cade." Cade stepped into the open. "I had it in me the day you strung my brother from the cottonwood tree." Royce stood there, revolver in hand, blood spattered across his shirt. His eyes, small and pale, met Cade's. A beat. The world seemed to hold its breath. They both raised their guns. The shots came as one. Cade felt the sting in his shoulder, saw Royce jerk as his own bullet found the man's chest. Royce staggered, his revolver falling, blood spilling dark down his front. Cade advanced as Royce dropped to his knees. "Should have finished me in Silver Bluff," Cade rasped. Royce coughed a wet laugh. "Shoulda," and then the last of his breath left him. Cade stood still a long moment, the canyon silent but for the soft wind. The girl emerged slowly from her hiding place, her face streaked with dust and tears, the goat trotting faithfully at her side. Cade knelt, reloaded, eyes scanning the rim, but there were no more Malleries left. He looked to the girl. "It's done." She didn't speak, just nodded. Cade turned, leading the way out of the canyon as the morning sun spilled fresh light across the blood-soaked sand. They buried Royce Mallerie and his sons right there in Creed's Canyon, under rough cairns of stone piled by Elijah Cade's own hands. There were no prayers spoken, no crosses hammered into the dust, just stones and silence. The girl stood a little way off, the goat nosing the sparse scrub, and watched him work. The sun hung heavy and cruel overhead, baking the blood into the sand until it turned dark and stiff. Cade wiped the sweat from his brow with the back of his sleeve, the ache in his shoulder a dull throb that hadn't eased since the shootout. The wound wasn't bad, a graze more than anything, but it reminded him with every movement that he'd come close, closer than he liked. He looked down at Royce's final resting place and spoke low. "Dust to dust, you mean bastard." Then he turned and left the dead to the vultures. The girl said nothing as they made their way back toward the stranger's ranch. She moved with a limp now, likely from the scrapes and bruises of the canyon's unforgiving rock. Her face was still streaked with dry tears and dust, hair hanging in tangled cords. But her eyes, when they met Cade's, no longer held the same hollow terror. Something else lived there now, something wary, but alive. They made camp that night under a copse of junipers, a small fire crackling low against the gathering dark. Cade roasted what little meat he had left, shared it evenly between them, and gave the goat a handful of tough grass to chew. The girl ate with her hands, tearing at the food like she hadn't in days. Cade waited until she was finished before speaking. "Got a name, girl?" She hesitated, the word catching in her throat like it had to be pulled free. Then, almost too quiet to hear, "Lena." Cade nodded. "Elijah Cade. Folks used to call me Long Eye Cade, on account of my shooting." A flicker of recognition crossed her face. In Dragon Junction, they'd whispered about him in snatches. The man who disappeared after Silver Bluff. The one who put 6 bullets in the man that hanged his brother. The one Royce Mallerie swore to kill, but never could find. Now, the legend sat across from her, flesh and blood, weary and lined but sharp as a rusted knife. "You gonna keep me?" she asked, voice small. Cade stared into the fire. The shadows played tricks on the flames, making the canyon walls he remembered flicker behind his eyes. He didn't speak for a long while. "Not mine to keep," he said finally. "But I'll get you someplace better than that pen in Dragon. Someplace where you ain't sold off like a mule." Lena didn't answer, but she didn't look away. The ride to the ranch took a day and a half. Along the way, Cade kept watch for any stragglers, kin of the Malleries or Dragon's hired guns. But word spread fast on the frontier, and no man with sense crossed paths with a blood-washed canyon and the ghost of Elijah Cade riding out of it. The ranch looked smaller on the return, the old barn slumped against the earth, the fence line sagging where no hands tended it. But it was safe ground. Cade led Lena through the gate, and the goat plodded faithfully after. The house, simple and sturdy, waited like a patient old dog. Inside, Cade cleaned his shoulder wound properly, poured whiskey into it while gritting his teeth. Lena stood at the doorway, watching him, saying nothing. "You can stay here a while," Cade told her. "Ain't much, but there's shelter. And I reckon you'll need time before heading anywhere else." He expected her to accept it quiet, maybe nod and vanish into the corner like a shadow. But Lena surprised him. "I can cook," she said, "and I know how to patch clothes. My ma taught me before they took her." Cade studied her, saw the set of her jaw, the stubborn angle of her chin. He gave a slow nod. "Then you'll do." They settled into a strange kind of rhythm. Cade tended the stock, what little there was, and hunted in the gullies. Lena kept the fire burning and cleaned the place until it no longer smelled like dust and old grief. The goat, for its part, became a fixture. Cade thought about trading it more than once, but figured it had earned its place after all it had seen. Nights brought a quiet Cade hadn't known in years, the kind that made a man's thoughts louder. He found himself watching the girl, the way she moved, the set of her shoulders. There was something forged in the fire of that canyon, some piece of steel she didn't know she carried yet. The folks in Dragon Junction didn't come looking, not openly, but stories spread like prairie fires, and before long, they were whispered in every saloon and bunkhouse from Dead Crow Gulch to Painted Rock. How Royce Mallerie and his butcher sons rode to Creed's Canyon and met their end. How one man stood against them with a girl and a goat in tow. And how Elijah Cade, long thought dead or worse, walked out of that canyon with death's dust on his boots. The legend grew, as such things do. One evening, maybe a month after the bloodshed, a rider came up the trail. Young, wide-eyed, hat in hand, said a man named Virgil Tate was gathering hands for a cattle drive south, but word was Cade might be looking for work. Cade sent him on his way. "I've had enough of following other men's tracks," he muttered. Later, by the fire, Lena spoke without prompting. "Why'd you do it?" Cade looked up from cleaning his rifle. "Do what?" "Buy me. At the auction. You didn't know me. Could have left me there." He set the rifle down, considered his words. "Once," he began, voice rough, "I rode with a man. Name was Josiah Klein. Good with a gun, terrible with cards. Saved my life in a mining camp near Devil's Backbone. He told me, a man don't owe the world much, but what he does owe, he'd best pay in full." Cade paused, eyes distant. "I'd owed a kindness a long time. Figure it was time to settle." Lena didn't reply, but something in her face softened. By fall, the ranch had more stock. Cade fixed the fence, hammered new shingles onto the roof. Lena planted a small garden. The goat got fat and mean, chased off coyotes twice its size. And every so often, riders passed on the horizon, heads ducked, spurs silent. Creed's Canyon grew quieter. Bones bleached white under the sun. Stones shifted. The land swallowed the blood, as it always did. But the story lived. In towns where men spat tobacco and talked of hard winters, they spoke of Cade, of the girl no one could break, of how justice, sometimes, rode with a long shadow and a slow horse. And though Elijah Cade never sought to be a legend, the frontier had a way of making men into something more than flesh. In time, folks would forget the faces of the Malleries, forget the goat's name, and maybe even the sound of Cade's rifle echoing down that canyon. But they wouldn't forget the dust, or the blood, or the man who paid his debts in full.